Welcome to Dungeon Mastery 123, where settings are made up and the rules don't matter. This module is a new series of modules we're going to be putting between our regular modules, something we can throw together quickly and easily between making our long-form content. And that was our first module, and that module is your first campaign. Getting your first game world up and running in your first actual campaign series, and doing it fast. One of the things that holds Dungeon Masters back is the idea of how much work and effort, how much detail they want to put into things, how much they think they need to put into things. Be aware you don't need to put in all that effort. That's a mistake. It's a misnomer. The truth is, you only need the barest bones to get your game off and running. You can always add more later. Let me give you an example. The earliest setting I was dealt with in Dungeons & Dragons, both as a Dungeon Master and a player back as a kid, was Mystara. This fantastical land based off of historical Europe and other countries. It had areas for everything from ancient Rome to medieval Italy to Aztec nations and cyberpunk elves. All these things existed side by side in this huge fantastical world full of gods and immortals. But here's the thing, it didn't start that way. It didn't start with a dozen gazetteers and articles in dragon magazines. It didn't start with 3 box sets. It started with a simple map. That map was a place called Threshold. It was supposed to be where the players were supposed to start, a simple town. No details, just a town out in the middle of nowhere. Players are supposed to either come from that town or travel to that town and go out to help it defend itself from local monsters. Threshold was the starting point, it was the jumping off point, but more importantly, it was the campaign itself. The Dungeon Master was expected to draw some simple dungeons, set the basic setting, and go from there. And that was it. And believe it or not, that's what we went with, that's what we did. We used Threshold, and we allowed players to roll some characters, that's all we needed. So with that in mind, we're going to help you build your first campaign setting, and even a campaign right now, and we're going to do it, hopefully, in another 30 minutes. So let's get started. First, our setting. As you notice, I can come up with a lot of settings, a lot of ideas, and these are fun. The latest one I've been thinking a lot about doing Conan-esque light setting, sword and sorcery and sandals and all that. First thing you should know is we're going light, we're going easy, we're using some simple rules in order to do this. So we're going with the Conan theme, so first thing we're going with is the idea of sword and sorcery. And so we're looking at burly men and powerful women using swords and fighting against some great hordes of monsters in ancient dungeons and ruined temples. Evil cultists with vast cults that are peppered through the world. Crypsides of decadence and vice, where the heroes squander their money and their time in gambling dens and drug halls. This is the world of Conan, and this is the world we're going to build. Alright, with that we have our general themes. We don't need to be too specific so far, but we have sword and sorcery, we have evil cults, we have the idea that, I think that if I remember correctly, magic is always terrible and bad in Conan-esque fights, things like that, so we're going to make sure that the majority of the focus on this game is going to be about martials and melee combat. And that wizards, while they'll be there, they won't necessarily be your friend. In fact, they'll usually be your enemy. When they go into too many details or to do too many things, just enough to get started. Ooh, Vice. Vice is also more important in Conan. With these giant cities of barbarians and ruffians who are crawling into town with their gold. And they're wasting it all on wine, women, wenches, and Black Lotus. Vice will be a major aspect of this game. Alright. We got that. So let's set some limitations. So what are the things we're going to need for this? Well, it's Conan, so we're going to need barbarians and things like that, people who don't wear a whole lot of armor. In fact, it's supposed to be an ancient world. So let's note this is going to be an ancient world. We'll make it based on some of the old legendary kingdoms and worlds and places that exist only in fragments of World War history, or that are made up. It's like Atlantis and Lemur, or Thule. We're going to set this in the land of Lemur. We can pretend like it might be our world, but it's not really. But we're going to put it back at the earliest dawn of man, when there might have been kingdoms, but those things are gone. This will be a time after the Great Freeze, or the Wintry Death, as they call it in ancient legends. The time where megafauna are still walking the land. So we're going to have things like mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, cave bears, and death birds. These very common fauna, along with giant elk and that sort of thing. We'll have great plains left behind from the passage of the great glaciers, cold, dry deserts. We're going to have ancient cities, ones that were there from before the cataclysm. Because this is a post-apocalypse, this is a post-cataclysm. The world was wiped out in a terrible wintry destruction, and it's still in their legends. It's all a time where language is it's simplistic. When you read something, you aren't just visually reading it, you're puzzling it through. There's no punctuation. There's no set spelling for many things. Many things are ideograms that may not be remembered. And even when there are spellings, different people spell different things differently. Just reading a simple page of text can take hours to puzzle through what it all really means. So we're going to plunk scribes in all this as well. Alright, so I'm getting off track, so let's get back to focus. What do we need for this? Because we're going Conan, we're going to go with unarmored defense rules. We'll use those from the Dungeon Master's Guide. We'll have iron weapons, so regular weapons are good. We'll even have crossbows, but nothing more complicated than that. There's no guns or anything like that here. Next, we're even going to use the cleave rules, the optional cleave rules, so that when warriors get in, they fight great groups of people, and they're fighting mobs, they'll be able to mow down large numbers of the monster in a single swing. Very Conan. Finally, we're going to add some additional rules. With that, I'm going to remove material components from this. The only material components the players are going to require for spells are literally material components that have cost. So all those little stupid things the players are supposed to wander around with, like fireflies and glow moss, don't worry about those. But on the other hand, all spells, and I'm saying this right now, every single spell requires both verbal and semantic components. That means that you have to have a hand free if you are casting a spell. Period. Yes, you have to speak loudly and proudly. You can't whisper your words. If you're casting a spell, everybody knows it. More importantly, you have to have a hand free. And you know what? Wrestling interferes with spell casting. If you are wrestled, if you're grappled, if you're grabbed, you can't cast spells unless you win the grapple. If you can't speak, you can't cast spells. If you can't wave your hands around, you can't cast spells. You don't have to carry around wands and bags or anything like that, but you do have to be able to actually cast spells. Don't worry about this too much, this is not going to be a spellcaster-focused game. Next, as I like wrestling, I'm also going to make an additional rule. In wrestling, not only can you cast spells, but you can't use any weapon larger than a knife or a fist load without having disadvantage. So if someone gets in close and grapples you, they can stab you to death very easily. But no one's getting a sword in there. If they do, they're doing it with disadvantage. Alright, we have our optional rules and they're in. Let's set our limitations. The first limitation is we're going to just go with the simple humans. That's it. I'm thinking about using additional races, but okay, fine. We use 2 additional races. No, 3. 1 snakemen, but at this point they're not open to players. 2 beastmen, which we'll probably reskin orcs for. These are powerful creatures that basically live off in the desert wastes, and that are bestial enemies of humans. But players might make a friend with 1 or 2. Finally, ghoulism. A great plague is sapping the world, and it is drawing sick and injured into it. And that we're going to have some Dampier-style ghoul-type characters, who are plague victims, who have literally been killed by the plague, and are able to pass it on in this form. Those are races, nothing else. Next, classes. For classes, we're going to do a simple pick 5. And by that means, I'm just going to go through the player's handbook. I'm going to eliminate everything that doesn't belong. I'm only going to pick 5 basic classes that are part of the game. If the players want to play anything beyond that, they have to accept the fact that they're going to have to make a really good reason why it's there, and be aware that that's the only one that's around. They're the exception, not the rule. So, we're doing Conan the Barbarian, so let's do Barbarians. That's a given. Next, Fighters and Rogues. Not only are they very Conan, but they're pretty much standards of the game.
You can cut out a bunch of characters, classes that don't fit. Obviously, Ranger and Paladins simply don't fit, neither do Bards. Under religious classes, we have both Druids and Clerics, and I'm considering that. I'll come back to that. Oh, casters. So we got 4 different arcane casters. Sorcerers, Wizards, Warlocks, and Artificers. Artificers are just out, period. And these are other 3. Wizards, Warlocks, and Sorcerers. To be honest, the 2 that are most likely to fit in a Conan-esque world are Warlocks and Sorcerers. After a lot of debate, yeah, let's just go ahead and go with Warlocks. Why? 1, because magic is very limited in the Conan setting. But the other point is, Warlocks are very thematic for Conan. The idea of engaging with dark powers to cast your spells is very Conan, so we'll go with Warlocks. That comes us down to our final class. We've only got 1 left. And I'm thinking, I'll go with the holy class. It's either going to be Druids or Clerics. And Druids kind of fit. But you know what? No. This is Conan. There are very rarely priests on Conan's side. In fact, Conan usually thinks the gods are against him. So, with that in mind, the gods are definitely part of the enemy. And evil cults abound. So we're going to basically keep Druids and Clerics away from the players for now. Maybe we might go forward, we might let the players add some, but right now, no basic Clerics or Druids. Instead, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in monks. These monks could be used in a variety of ways. We'd have your standard ascetic monks living in ancient temples and studying the ways of combat and chi. Or these might be gladiators and pit fighters that have been reskinned from the monk templates. Same or similar types of weapons, the same kind of attack moves, but with your pit fighter, rather than harnessing chi, he might be harnessing inner will, or just downright meanness. Focus and pain to beat the living snot out of someone with their bare hands. Once again, very Conan. Noting for now, we're not multi-classing. If the players want to multi-class, that might come up narratively, but it's gotta come up narratively. For instance, if players end up retreating to a mystic temple full of monks and the monks take them in and they spend months there, I could see them learning the ways of the monastery. There's no dipping, there's no getting 4 levels in and taking a level of Warlock. Besides, the immortal patrons of the Warlocks wouldn't have it. If you become a Warlock, they're not letting go of you. You're taking Warlock from there on, so be aware of that. But by default, no multi-classing. Alright, with that, we're only a short while in, already we have a very unique and focused world coming here. There's a world of brave barbarians and clever thieves with minimal weapons and armor, fighting in ancient temples and ruins, hauling back mounds of gold to party and celebrate before going out again. Alright, with that, I'm going to do a controversial idea here. I'm definitely going to go gold for experience. I mean by that, when the players go out and they basically collect their treasures and rewards, when they come back, they have to celebrate, buy weapons and gear, let everyone know that they are the great and mighty heroes. And when they're done, they're broke. Because that's one of the themes of Conan. Everyone's constantly broke. So we'll let them spend their gold literally for experience points. They come back, they're expected to party, and everything they spend on the party goes right into their experience. Defeating monsters, fighting beasts, all that kind of stuff doesn't get you experience. Getting that gold back, that gets your experience. Alright, with that, we now have a basic campaign framework. Brave men and women fighting foul beasts, evil wizards, and dubious cults. Alright, let's build our world. With that, like I said, in the beginning, they only had a map, and that's all you need. You need a map of some place that they can start off with. A couple more points of interest, maybe 2 or 3 that you make some notes about, and then a few more that are there for them to check out. We're going to use our rules of 1, 2, 3, and 7 here for this. So 1, we have our first place, our major starting point. And we are going to have this, the ancient kingdom of Ur. Ur is a massive town, a massive city. It is ancient and it is powerful. It's ruled by the king priest, Marduk. And Marduk is named after the god who basically rules this place. It should be noted that religion and faith in the world of Lemur is not organized religion the way we know it. Instead, the gods talk to their priests,
Every single religion, every faith, really formatted around a single prophet who speaks for their individual gods. All the priests worship the prophet as much as they worship the god itself. And the prophet is the guidepost. They are the source. They dictate when the rituals take place. They dictate when the sacrifices take place. They tell players what the god's wills are. It's not about books. It's not about organized temples and faiths. Everyone is constantly listening to the prophet. And every city is ruled by one of these king priests. In this case, Marduk rules the city of Ur. And the god Marduk is the overlord of it. He is the ancient god of the sky, and he watches the world. The town itself is a trade town. Long ago, supposedly there had been gold and iron here. While there's still iron in the ground, the gold is long since gone. Instead, it's scattered out among the caves and old ruins around the area. Lost caravans in haunted oases and deadly hag caves. Players, if they want to make a living, either have to struggle with a job in Ur, or they have to go off as an adventurer. And we know what the players are, they're adventurers. The thing to know here is that Ur is led by Marduk and his god Marduk, and that despite his overwhelming presence, Marduk is indifferent to the city. He cares little about what happens here. He allows his ministers and his army to run amok. Bribery and corruption are everywhere. Petty bureaucrats are petty despots who control entire wards. They run the city a combination of flippant cruelty and personal whim. There is little chance to get us to build anything of value because it will only be stolen by those above you. Players are expected to spend their money as quickly as they can because if they don't, it'll probably be taken from them, either in fines, taxes, or just outright stolen. Crime is everywhere, and Marduk does not care. His cult rules the city and takes whatever they want, and to deny them is to deny the will of the god Marduk. And that we have our first city, a corrupt, crazed town of vice and corruption, of evil ministers and deadly cults and evil wizards. Welcome to Marduk. Let's put a couple more towns nearby. We're going to put the town of Mok and Eridu nearby. Eridu is named after the goddess Eridu, who is the queen of Marduk. Eridu is actually quite different than Marduk and Ur. Eridu, you see, is based around clay and pottery. The town is made of adobe and clay. Eridu is famous for its pottery, and it makes incredible ceramics. They're fine porcelain and light pots, careful crafting and incredible sculptures. It is said that Eridu, they make arrow tips made from fine ceramic so thin that you could slice through a mammoth with a single arrow, but so light the archer can carry dozens of arrows without being burdened. Whether that's true or not is yet to be seen, but Eridu is much different than Ur. Eridu is expected to pay homage to Ur, but is in contest with Ur. You see, Marduk and Eridu, the two gods, have been in conflict for quite some time. You see, he is the king and she is the queen, and they do not like each other anymore. Long before frozen death of their son Tyr, he ran amok. He was one of the 6 brothers, and he was the most destructive one, and he was the most powerful one as well. He decided that he was going to conquer the world. He went forth and attempted to destroy everything and bring everything under his control, but in the end he went too far. He conquered the world, and himself in the process was conquered. It is said that his brothers turned against him. His great city was destroyed and is lost out there in the waste. For that, we're going to put the legendary city of Tyr, along with Eridu and Ur. And Tyr is a lost city. It's supposedly led by the god of war Tyr, who no longer exists. Supposedly Tyr is dead. Doesn't mean war is dead. It just means that a new god of war one day might be chosen, or that the other gods might fight over that position or role. That there supposedly should be a great war of the gods to determine who the great new general will be, and we'll see that. That city lies out there, lost in the wastes, waiting for someone to arrive and either resurrect Tyr or find the god who wants to take his place. And with our final town, we are going to have Hesse. Hesse is our northernmost town. It is near the Lost Wastes, and it is the most fascinating town, because Hesse isn't one that was built by man. It was built from before the Cataclysm. Hesse is an ancient city. Everything around it, there are visions and symbols of the snake god Hesse. No one knows anything about the snake god anymore. They simply know that at one time he existed and he ruled the world, and that he is long gone. He existed before the time of the gods, before the time of man. That is the only thing that remains is known, though his ancient statues and ancient temples stand everywhere through the city. The city itself is built on the remains of this ancient monstrosity, and it is one of the few cities that has no god. As such, it is a strange and odd place, a place supposedly filled with victims of the walking death, the ancient plague that robs men of their lives, leaving its victims either shallow, sunken albinos who live deep underground, craving human flesh, or killing them outright and leaving them wasting away into nothing. Congratulations, with that we now have a campaign. We have a main town, Marduk. We have a sister town, Eridu. We have a mysterious town of Hesse, which is crawling with undead and ghouls. And we have the lost city of Tyr, our first major dungeon or fortress. We know the land is populated by giant woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers. We established some basic rules. From here we can go through and do things, like for instance, for creatures that live out in the wasteland, we can choose just 7 random species that belong out there, things like dire wolves, saber-toothed tigers, and mammoths, that kind of thing. Things the players can focus on. Don't need a lot. Just choose the most important things to a region, and remember, once you get to 7, it's about time to stop. Same thing with things like herbs, drugs, and poisons. Create a handful and let the players know it, but you don't need to basically focus on them right away. Just have 1 or 2 things you can throw at them. You know that the area has wine and probably has mead and beer. You know that they have gambling and they have gladiatorial dens. In fact, our city of Ur is different than most adventuring cities. Why? Because often enough the players start off in a single good place that they're trying to defend from evil. But when it comes to the city of Ur and its King Marduk, this place is the evil place. This is the source of evil. This is where the terrible things lie. The players are living in the town of evil, and they're actually going out and adventuring away from it, only to come back and to party there. Whether they stay in Marduk or not is up to them. Whether or not they overthrow Marduk is up to them. We haven't set a campaign yet, just the world. Once we tell the players, once we give it to them, and once they decide what they want to do, we can see where they want to go. Don't stop the players from adventuring this world and making up ideas. If they want to overthrow Marduk, the king priest, make your adventures about overthrowing Marduk. If they want to go and find the city of Tyr and possibly decide who the new god of war is, or maybe become the new god of war, go with that. If they want to explore the desert waste and find old caravans and rescue their riches and take them back home, do that. If they want to go up to Hesse and find what built that ancient city, or maybe join the kingdom of ghouls, or defeat them, go with that. Let the players decide what they want to do. You only need to create a world and create some basic elements. Once you know what the players want to do, just make sure those elements are far enough apart that it's going to take a session or 2 to get to them. That gives you time to build those things as they get there. You don't have to do everything at once. This is an ancient land, and animal husbandry is barely known. The players aren't going to teleport or fly to the next location anytime soon. They're going to have to walk, and they're going to face many difficulties between here and there. So put those many difficulties in, create them as you go. Start out with this main city, introduce them, let them get into some trouble, Something small, something simple to start off with. Then let them tell you what kind of campaign they want to do, what kind of world. And once they do, then you can flesh those areas out. We don't know much about Iridu. We don't know much about Hess. We don't know much about Tyr. We know big detail about each one. And when we get there, we can make more details. More ideas, more legends, more things. Because this world is a very unique place, very different. It survived a major cataclysm. It is crawling up and building a new world for the first time, but it is a corrupt world, a tainted world. A world built on lies and destruction. Why? Because this is a world ruled by the gods. Small gods, petty gods, gods that control only certain places. Gods that fight or have a hierarchy. But those gods have a secret. One that the scribes have been able to determine. The scribes who have been able to find bits and pieces of old literature, old scrolls, things written on tombs, things contained in old relics and legends, things even passed on to them by the living dead. That is a secret that they've only recently discovered and only begun to whisper among themselves and pass back and forth through writing. The secret is, the gods are lying.
And here's the best thing about it. When we made this setting just now, we went above and beyond. We made some gods. We made actual cities. We chose classes. We made some rules. You don't need to do that. For your first campaign setting, you're going to run the game pure and simple, as written. Can you cut? Can you reskin? Absolutely. But you don't need to do that. All you need, someplace to start from, some basic goals, and then let the players guide you. The players help you decide what the campaign is. Can you and should you have some ideas? Yes. But be aware, this is their story, not yours. It's your world, but they're the main players. They're not necessarily going to do what you want them to do. They're going to be motivated by all kinds of things. So, just create what you need and go from there. The rest will unfold by circumstance, by ideas you come up with and ideas they have, their goals and their motives. If you go just what you plan out, what you prepare, you can spend a lot of time focusing on things you'll never use. Or you'll force them to use things they don't want to use. Either way, one of you is not going to be happy. So, just get a basic framework together and go for it. Start your campaign, start your idea. Take a few minutes of time, take an hour, and come up with some ideas. And then grab yourself a map and run your first game. With that, we're done for now. Good luck and good gaming.